There are some places in the mortal realms that are best left forgotten, right? The dominions of chaos, the pocket realms that have fallen to madness, and ritual sites haunted by the innocents who were sacrificed there for some dark purpose. One such place is the Gibbering Dome, an unimaginably vast repository of knowledge, wisdom, and magic tethered between the realms of Akshi, fire, and Chaman, metal. Like a kite that is bound to a string, so this long-forgotten, arcane structure is bound between these two realms. This place was not always a mystery. In fact, its location was once very well known, and its secrets regularly being explored. And in today's video, we're going to talk all about the Voidskein, aka the Gibbering Dome, as it's known today, throughout the realms. This video is a joint effort on the part of me and the Mortal Realms podcast. Both of us are dedicated to experiencing the full depths of the hobby by plunging deep into its lore. The outstanding gentlemen of that podcast also are hosting the narrative events for both Warcry and Age of Sigmar at Adepticon 2020. And I reached out and asked if I could provide lore coverage and kind of try to help hype up the event. And so in today's video, we're going to be talking about the setting of those narrative events. And it all begins back in the Age of Myth. Exactly who built the Voidskein is a mystery. But if we look at it from the outside, imagine a thick, knotted spider web with a soft glow and its branches into the void. On one end, Chaman, realm of metal. On the other end, Akshi, realm of fire. This webbing is known as ether web, and it contains some incredibly curious properties. Aside from its soft glow and the ability to bind itself to the very fabric of the realms themselves, the ether web is able to keep, infuse, and solidify any form of knowledge. It's a very strange material, and if you get stuck in the web, all that you know is unraveled and stored within it. Likewise, you can tap into it to gain an immense amount of understanding. It's like a knowledge vacuum. And there is one structure built deep within this webbing, existing wholly between the two realms, that was once known as the Voidskein. It was the knowledge center of the realms, and we'll talk about that in just a moment and exactly what it does. But this structure is a colossal dome of mind-bending size, its roof going far beyond the sight of most mortals. And it's fully constructed from a material called nullstone, which is sort of the realm stone, for quote-unquote lack of a better word, of the void itself. I suppose you could say it's, a realm stone that's not tied to a specific wind of magic. Its curious property is that it is resistant to all magics. It literally creates a null zone. That also means it keeps out the gods themselves who embody those types of magics. So this is a very unique place. Magic and sorcery doesn't really work here. The structure itself shuts them down. However, it can, with the ether web, take the knowledge of how to do those things from you. And there's one more thing we need to address before we get into the chronological story, if you will, and that is the Dur-thrath. It stands to reason that whoever built the Voidskein also built the Dur-thrath. Colossal spider-like constructs also formed from nullstone. These creatures are massive in size, like you would imagine, and each of them slowly plods along the ether web, pulling raw magic that's kind of spinning into the void off the realms from their crazy edges, concentrates it into, a solid form, and that becomes the ether web. They are the spiders who are creating this. Each of these gargantuans is mostly mindless. They spend their eternity repairing and maintaining the Voidskein. So in this way, we have the spiders and their web and the Voidskein nestled within it. Now it's important to note that at the end of the web, right where they meet the realms, there are actually realm gates, right? This place is accessible if you know where it is. The first explorers to enter the area did so with great anticipation, and when a curious Dur-thrath descended to greet them, they were filled with fear, and all of them but one ran away. This remaining warrior tried to fight this monolithic beast, but it was of course cut down. When this explorer's remains were added to the ether web, his knowledge was infused with it as well. And with that, the Dur-thrath, all of them, instantly gained understanding and perspective that they needed. Oh, these are travelers. They meant us no harm. They wanted to explore. Like that kind of stuff. They instantly understood what was really happening. So when the next group of wanderers came in, over some time, the Dur-thrath were ready for a proper greeting. The party entered through a realm gate to find a Dur-thrath kneeling before them, and then a small hatch or door opened up on its side. Remember, these are big constructs, right? Think the spider from Wild Wild West type thing. One explorer walked up and cast his mind to what was inside, and immediately he was filled with the knowledge of the ancients, an understanding of the realms, their purpose, his purpose, total knowledge. And with this, a gold rush for understanding and knowledge exploded on the scene. People far and wide from every race and creed flocked to behold this wonder. Right, an ancient structure, divorced from the realms, granting knowledge and wisdom. And around the realm gates leading there, entire towns started to spring up full of wise men, scholars, traders, people who would host lodging, all of it. And it was at this time that the Dur-thrath began to learn the duplicity of mortals, right? Basically, they allowed all the children that came to them to be enlightened without question, okay? They would leave and optimistically share what they knew with the realms. That was the whole point of learning here. But when it came to adults, the Dur-thrath, once you kind of throw your mind into the ether web, it reads you as much as you read information from it. So they began to see everything, right? The politician who talks about the good of his fellow man but is secretly embezzling, the trader who swindles people out of money, corrupt officials, all this stuff. When a person enters into the Dur-thrath, all the knowledge of the Voidskin is granted to them, and then they get scanned as well. So when an unworthy person steps in, they are basically judged and kept. Rather than leaving, those who fail this test really are taken and absorbed into the web. So now, at this point, if you are corrupt, you're just making the ether web smarter, but getting nothing in return. And this goes on for some amount of time, right? More and more people flock in, tribes send their young to learn all they can and aid their countrymen, but it's not without consequence. The Dur-thrath are spending so much time doing this that the dome itself and the web around it is beginning to fall into disrepair. The souls of all the unworthy, right, the people they stuck inside the web, are trapped and screaming. At this point, the Dur-thrath began to deny entry to all but children to try and stem the tide of visitors. Now, if you are going to this event over at Adepticon, they have a fantastic, quite extensive lore entry for this whole thing. For the sake of making this a reasonably time-framed video, I'm going to yada 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 just to hear a little bit, but it is really fascinating. A scholar from Hish arrives bringing a child with him, as well as a large complement of monks dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. The child enters. From him, the Dur-thrath understand the scholar's plan, and that is to build a center for learning and enlightenment within the Voidskin, in that giant dome. The large number of monks brought in, and they begin construction immediately, building massive universities, homes, streets, libraries. All of it is built within the walls of this dome. And this is when we're kind of coming up to the zenith of the age of myth. Its students only sought out knowledge. And all these things are going great, but in the end, it was the gods themselves who undid this center of enlightenment. Perhaps seeing mortals filled with understanding of the realms filled them with uncertainty, what are they going to do with this knowledge? Maybe there's some sort of Pandora's box thing, there's something that they didn't want them to understand. Whatever the case was, they wanted the Voidskin shut down. And it was Teclis who cracked the code on how to do it. Remember, because of the Nullstone, the gods themselves could not directly intervene, and so a cunning plan was put in motion. Teclis took a willing servant and kind of wiped his memory, right? He could function, but he just kind of didn't know who he was, what was going on, and gave him a complement of monks and directed them all, go to the Voidskin, where they were accepted because, they looked into his mind, didn't see much going on there, oh, you must be an optimistic, open-minded person, and he was allowed into the Voidskin, where the scholar, as soon as he got in there, was basically programmed, right, Manchurian Candidate style, eat a piece of Nullstone, which is a strange thing to do. And this act was important, right? Get inside the Voidskin, eat a piece of Nullstone. That was his plan. And this was super important, because remember what we've been talking about, the Etherweb naturally pulls knowledge into it. And the Nullstone is compressed Etherweb. So when this scholar ingested it, it wrecked him. Teclis took his memory so the Dur-thrath would allow him entry, letting him see he's not an evil person, but eating the Voidstone took everything, right? His knowledge of how to breathe, eat, walk. It was a true mind wipe in the sense that it shuts down your automatic abilities of your brain. The scholar at this point had become a living infection to knowledge and understanding, right? The monks brought him into the Dur-thrath. Upon touching him, the Dur-thrath's mind also went blank, acting as if it forgot any of these mortals had ever arrived. All that knowledge it had was severed from the Aetherweb. Acting on impulse, it took the scholar out to the Aetherweb and began stitching him into it. And all of the other Dur-thrath looked on in horror as they knew what would happen next, because when the scholar from Hysh was woven into the web, the virus ran its course. Every Dur-thrath was connected by this knowledge network, and it was instantly shut down. All that knowledge was being infected and corrupted by this one scholar. And so all the Dur-thrath began to wander aimlessly. In fact, they wandered so hardcore that they actually walked out of the Voidskin through those realm gates and just started meandering across the realms. However, the Voidskin, now known as the Gibbering Dome for its ability to sap knowledge and leave you as a gibbering lunatic, is still there. And remember, all the things that were built inside of it are still there. It's still full of treasure and riches and libraries, where all the things were recorded that people had access to, right? And it's protected naturally by how hard it is to access, as well as roaming spirits of the undead and the monks who once served within it. It's an abandoned city full of corpses and danger, and for the brave, opportunity. This siren's call, right, of all the tempting things to come in and get killed, is what leads armies into the Gibbering Dome, trying to acquire these forgotten treasures or glory or just a bunch of nullstone. And so let's talk really briefly about why is this a cool idea? Well, first of all, I think that the main impetus for me reaching out to the Mortal Realms guys is I want narrative events to get as much coverage as competitive ones. And when they sent me over like how detailed, like I thinned out quite a bit of their lore, and you should really check it out on their page. I'm sure they'll put it up here for Adepticon. But there's a lot of detail regarding the monks and how they interacted with stuff. Like they put a lot of work, it's a lot of world building into this little slice of the Mortal Realms I thought was awesome. It's basically a neural web, right? And a virus to understanding, which is the fun idea, is introduced into that web. And I love that the idea of it as a setting. This is a developing narrative, so I hope we see why the gods were scared of it, right? That's what I really want to know. Why was it priority number one? I would love to learn more about that from the writers of this. It sets a great scene as well, because if you think about the way the dome is described, first of all, it's massive. Like it's just, you can fit many, many armies inside of it. It has abandoned cities, it has open spaces because they didn't like colonize the entire thing. It has moving entrances because you can get to it through one of the Dur-thrath that are wandering the realms, or of course, these stable realm gates leading to it. And it's full of treasures and artifact and glory, and I think it's perfect for, this setting is being used for both Warcry and Age of Sigmar events, and I think it's perfect for both of them. Conquering armies that are just trying to secure every realm gate can wander in. Warcry warbands, I think because they're smaller and lighter, maybe it leans more towards like artifact and treasure hunting, but all of it is really awesome. So join me this year at Adepticon, provided that things don't get kind of hairy. There's a lot of sickness going around. But if I do make it out there, follow me on social media. I'll be doing interviews, army explorations, telling the story as it happens, with a big final video when I get home telling the full story of what happened in 2020 at the Gibbering Dome. I want to give another shout out and praise for the Mortal Realms podcast. They do incredible book reviews, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to leave a link to their podcast in my description down below. Please go check it out, subscribe, and I hope to see you all next time. Happy wargaming.